is February 21st, 2024. This is episode 54 and episode 16 of season 3 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Mike Koomar. Mike, huge weekend in hoops. A lot of teams. The big dogs went down. The Big 12 is taking shape, but as usual, we'll start with your team of the week.
Thanks, Sean. After Tuesday's win, there was only one clear team of the week, and that had to be the Creighton Jays out of Omaha, Nebraska. Started the week. Last Tuesday, they got a dominant 22-point win over a pretty meaningless Georgetown Hoyas team. They followed it up with a 22-point dominant victory at Butler in Indiana, in what was kind of a must-win game for Butler as they sit right there on the bubble. Creighton obliterated them, and then come Tuesday against number one team in the country, the clear-cut number one team in the country, the UConn Huskies, they win by 19 points. They dominated against the UConn Huskies. This game was never really close, and they really just dominated. They shot 54% from the field, 50% from field goal range. It really appears, Sean, that this Creighton team that had so many eyes on them at the start of the year, they're finally playing their best basketball of the year. And a lot of their key players that are have a lot of years of playing basketball are playing well. Stephen Ashworth in this game, Sean, he had 20 points. Kalkbrenner had 15. Baylor Shireman had 12, and Alexander had 16. So guys are starting to score in bunches. This is kind of what we expected out of the Creighton offense to start the year, and they're finally taking shape.
Yeah, this is, the Greg McDermott teams over the years have been really talented offensively. And last year is a little different. Last year they kind of had to grind it out and get stops, and they had to win ugly. Not the case here. Now, you talked about the UConn win, Mike, but I want to go back to the Butler one first. Butler, an NCAA tournament team. They go on the road, beat them by 20+. They're losing at halftime. So they turn that thing around. They win the second half 45-22 there, and then they take UConn by 19. Big increase in the numbers for the Jays. They're starting to, they're starting to get a little bit of an impact off the bench. They had 14 bench points against UConn. That's certainly not a ton, but it's a lot more than they've been used to. They've been used to pretty much five players, and then they didn't have a single bench point against Butler, but that's because you got two in the 20s. So Creighton, we talked about this, Joe and I, in our Big Ten show, about peaking at the right time. Now's the time when you want to start playing your best basketball. End of January, early February, you can learn some things, but at this point, you are what you are, and it's time to increase that seed line, which Creighton has definitely done. We'll see where they stack up. I'm going to do a bracket projection tomorrow, but Mike, what a performance from Creighton this week. They do sit 3 games behind UConn in the Big East, so the Huskies still looking good to win that. Win the regular season. You got Marquette and Creighton probably battling for that 2 or 3 spot. And then Seton Hall looks pretty locked into the 4. And then other than that, it's a mishmash here in the Big East. So anything you want to wrap up on Creighton before we move to the rest of the conference?
Yeah, I just thought a really interesting comment by Coach Shirley for UConn is he kind of said his team ran into a buzzsaw in this game against the Creighton Jays. And that's certainly what it seemed like. UConn is still a really good team. Really good teams are allowed to have a bad game every now and then as long as it's not in March or early April. So UConn's going to bounce back. They're going to be just fine.
Yeah, the Hurley did say the coaches did a bad job of coaching and the players did a bad job of playing. Now, I think that's a pretty simple way to put it. He's one of the more fiery guys in the business, but still not really worried about them. All 3 of their losses have been on the road against pretty good teams. So the NCAA tournament's not played on the road, so not quite much to worry about yet. UConn's still going to win the Big East. They're still going to be the 1 seed in the Big East tournament. You still have to win 3 games in that tournament to host that trophy. So move on, Mike, to really those 3 teams that I mentioned at the top are locks for the tournament. Seton Hall, Providence are probably on the right side of the bubble right now in the Big East. You got Villanova and St. John's probably on the outside of the bubble. And then you got Xavier, Georgetown, and DePaul needing the auto bid. So starting to see some tears form in the Big East, and a lot the Big East is probably going to have the most important games the rest of the way for tournament because there's so many teams around the bubble, and it's not really what we expected at the beginning of the year.
No, I think we thought a lot more teams would be solidly in at this point. But I will give teams like Seton Hall a lot of credit. You know, people, including us, were very discrediting of Seton Hall during the out-of-conference season, and rightfully so. But they've found their way. They've found their footing here in conference play a little bit. They're 10-5, Sean. If you had said that 10-5 wasn't a bubble or was a bubble team at the start of the year in the Big East, I think we would have thought you were crazy. But at the end of the day, they just kind of shot themselves in the foot in the out-of-conference. So I think they've got a really good shot. They're going to have a tough end of the season. Their next three hosting Butler, and then they go at Creighton, at UConn. So 3 really tough games there, but they'll finish up the season with 2 home games against Villanova and DePaul. So Seton Hall will definitely have their opportunities to wrap up a bid. I think Villanova, another team, the time is now, right? They've got to be damn near perfect coming down the stretch. They've got Creighton, they've got Seton Hall, they've got Providence, and they've got Georgetown and UConn. So you chalk that up, probably 1 automatic win, 1 automatic loss, and 3 games in there that they really got to get in order to get into the big dance. St. John's kind of seems like they've really fallen off. They've got a good start right now against Georgetown, up by 11 with 12 minutes to go in the first half. And certainly Pitino had a fiery message for his team going into this game after their loss to Seton Hall, Sean, if you want to get into that.
It made airwaves not just around the sport, Mike, but around, all of sports. Pretty simply, he threw his players under the bus by name for being slow and unathletic and just bad basketball players, which the last part might not be true, but you could be as good of a coach as you could be the greatest coach of all time and not make a non-athletic player athletic. Like, these players are what they are. Like, he brought them in. He started blaming his assistants. Well, they didn't get me the right players. Well, he built this entire team from scratch. He didn't have to do that. A.J. Storr was at St. John's. Paj Alexander was at St. John's. Now, they might have been leaving no matter what, but his comments are certainly obviously meant to get a reaction out of the players, but kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth here, as he is the guy that is responsible for putting together this group of players.
Certainly. I think this is really just Rick Pitino trying to fire up his team. They've lost 3 straight games, and their hopes of making the tournament are dwindling fast, especially with their last 4 games of the season, or really their last 5. 3 of them are very winnable, but Butler and Creighton, they kind of got to get those in order to get into the tournament. So I think he's really just trying to energize his team. But yeah, certainly I think there are better ways to do it other than trying to call out your players personally and calling them the most unathletic team you've ever coached. Certainly not a good look, especially for where some of his teams were at the start of his career.
Now, Mike, they are 14-12, which, as you remember, kind of an unwritten rule. You kind of have to be 3 games over 500 to get in at large. Well, they have Georgetown right now, and then they have Georgetown again and DePaul again. So
yeah,
you'd like to think they're going to clear the requisite games over 500. They got a home game against Creighton that we'll talk about later, and an away game against Butler. I mean, 5 games left. All 5 games are winnable. They're good enough to win all 5, and that might be what it takes to be. As there's a lot of other Big East teams on the bubble that they have not beat.
I think it's going to take winning their last 5 games in order to get in to the big dance. I'll be honest, Sean. I don't think a below 500 conference Big East squad is going to make it to the big dance this year. And right now, St. John's is sitting at 6-9. Yeah, they've got 3. We can chalk it up as almost automatic wins, but I think they got to get, if not one, both of those to even have a chance of getting into the big dance.
Yeah, the Big East tournament is at Madison Square Garden, which is sometimes their home arena, but other teams travel well to that. So it's not it's not going to be a home game when they play UConn or Villanova or Providence. It's just not. So relying on that is not going to be a good a good strategy for the Johnnies. But they're looking good so far, up 23-9 now over Georgetown. So hopefully for them they get the W and can make things interesting down the stretch here. We're going to go into the other conference, Mike, that had a big dog fall, and that's the Big Ten. Ohio State in Jake Diebler's first game in charge knocked off Purdue. Joe Mead and I talked about this the other day. A lot of things to talk about from this one, but what was your instant reaction? Did you watch it, or when you saw what happened, what was the reaction?
Yeah, I was on the golf course, unfortunately, in Arizona, but it was really interesting to see how teams react to coaches getting fired. You see it on both sides. I remember, as a Baylor fan, for example, a couple of years ago playing against a TCU team that had just fired their coach. Baylor was, I think, 10-1 in the year, or 9-1 on the year, and TCU was like 4-5, and TCU got the win. Rivalry games are weird, but when a team has a coach fired, no matter where they are, it creates an interesting scenario. Ohio State clearly came to play. They were fired up. They were motivated to play playing inspired basketball. And just like that, I think Ohio State's got a long way to go if they want to have a chance at making the big dance. But if they win 4 of their last 5, Sean, do they have a chance? You look at their schedule. They've got Michigan. They've got Rutgers. They've got Minnesota. Those are all very winnable games. And then if they can kind of steal one on the road against Michigan State, all of a sudden you're looking at a team that's on the bubble. So yeah, I think Ohio State right now, they got a lot to look up for them after that huge monumental win against Purdue.
Their numbers are okay, but they are 5-10 in the Big Ten, so they probably do need to be 10-10 and then win 2 games, and for any chance of an at-large. It's super far away. They don't have a single road win on the year. They do have that neutral win against Alabama, but a lot of bad. They lost to Michigan, so they're certainly further away than some of these other Big Ten teams that are pretty far away from the bubble. But Mike, in the age of the transfer portal and NIL, these Ohio State players are probably playing for their futures in college basketball, whether it's how much of an NIL bump they're going to get, or because chances are low that many of them will be around at Ohio State next year. But Bruce Thornton, good game. He's got 2 years left of eligibility. We'll see where he goes next year. Jamison Battle, though, is out of eligibility after this year. So you got some contributions from your bench players, and then Purdue, a couple stats to throw out. They shot 9 threes against one of the worst defensive three-point teams in the country, and they shot 33 twos that were not from Zach Edey. That's a coaching mistake from me, and hopefully Painter doesn't make it again.
Well, yeah, hopefully Painter doesn't make it at the wrong time, right? We've seen Matt Painter not be able to get the job done in March. So, it doesn't matter how good this Purdue team is going to be in the regular season. If they can't win a couple games in the NCAA tournament, who knows what happens with Matt Painter. But the thing with this Ohio State team is they've got also a lot of players that this is going to be the end of their basketball career. One of their star forwards, Battle, is going to be he's done playing. And then role players like Key and Dale Bonner playing in his 5th year of eligibility. These guys are not going to have any more basketball left. So you wonder if they're playing a little more inspired, knowing that, hey, clock is running out.
So, Mike, Ohio State is in Columbus, as most of our viewers probably know. Now, it was not at the same arena, but Purdue did lose to Fairleigh Dickinson in Columbus, Ohio last year. So perhaps a little bit of bad vibes in the air in Columbus.
Bad juju for the Boilers.
They did play where the Blue Jackets play, and that's not Valley City Arena, but still, I was tough. They're going to be in Indianapolis for their first round game most likely, so they'll be in front of a home crowd. But
yes.
Up next, Mike, we're going to go to the Big 12. We talked about it being a mishmash kind of all year, and we're starting to see just a little bit of separation at the top. We've got Houston after a good weekend. They smoked Texas at home, and then they took care of Iowa State at home. They are 10-3. They lead the Cyclones by 1. Cyclones are 9-4. Then you've got Kansas, Baylor, and Tech at 8-5. BYU, TCU at 7-6. Texas and Oklahoma at 6-7. Cincinnati, who's in action now against Oklahoma State, at 5-7. K-State at 5-8. So let's go back to Houston first. Pretty impressive couple days for the Cougars.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Cougars team, they've had a couple of close games, but they're just finding ways to win right now. And against Iowa State, I get it was an 8-point win, but it never really felt like we were ever nervous about Houston losing this game. They just always had a little bit of an arm's reach. I think this game got within 5 points one time later in the fourth quarter, but this game was always they had their arms separated from Iowa State. I don't even think Iowa State ever had a lead in this game. And then you looked at how they dominated Texas. They played Cincinnati tight, but Cincinnati can be tough on the road. This is just a really, really impressive team, and we thought, Sean, these guys would struggle a little bit more with the physicality in the Big 12, and it's clear that they haven't. Just 5 games left now in the regular season, and only a couple of those are really tough. I mean, they'll play at Baylor on Saturday, which is going to be a tough one, and then they will host Kansas in the final game of the regular season. They got a couple of road games at UCF, at Houston, or at Oklahoma, excuse me, but I don't see them losing those games. I think Houston's kind of in the driver's seat. Baylor certainly had a golden opportunity to catch these guys. They had to win against Brigham Young and then beat Houston on Saturday, but had a shut the daylights out of the ball, offensive rebound of Baylor. So Baylor now 2 back, and State, they don't really have another opportunity to get one off the Cougars, and they really don't know if anybody can catch Houston.
It's going to be hard for a team to sweep Houston, but we're really just Cincinnati is on the bubble in this conference, and really other than that, there's a lot of teams that are safe. Iowa State is probably looking at a 3 seed. It's going to be tough for them to get to a 2 because of their 300th ranked non-conference strength of schedule. We got Kansas probably around the same, might sneak a 2, and then you got Baylor probably around the 3-4 range, BYU 5-6, Tech 5-6-7, TCU and Texas around the 8-9, but something around that right now. Obviously can't give a extremely pinpoint projection right now because I haven't done it. And 7-10, those seeds are so close. You're splitting hairs over something in those. I mean, it is really just, there is no science to it, and I think we'll see a lot of projections right, kind of 1 through 6. And then once we get to 7 through 10, that's when one game down the stretch can make the difference. But we'll get to the later big.
Sean, Cincinnati.
Go ahead, Mike.
Cincinnati's really got to start playing better ball, though. They've been sliding a lot lately, and right now they're down by 7 later in the first half against Oklahoma State team that they need to beat. Doesn't seem like Cincinnati is, capitalizing off of some big opportunities. They barely snuck one away against UCF on Saturday, so they got to get their act together if they want to make the tournament here and close out some games.
The Bearcats have sort of, I think, wasted a couple of good opportunities at home to beat some of these tournament teams. They lost to Texas. They did get TCU, but they lost to Oklahoma, and they lost at West Virginia. They actually do have a couple of good road wins, though. They won at BYU, and they won at Texas Tech. So that's the only thing kind of keeping them close to the field right now. They do have, they need this one tonight, Mike, because they go on the road to TCU and Houston before hosting Kansas State, on the road at Oklahoma, and hosting West Virginia on the way in. Hard to see better than a 2-3, 3-2 in those 5 games.
I mean, they're not going to beat TCU in Houston. I just don't think they are. So then you get to the last 3 games and shoot, can they win 2 of those 3? I think that's what's going to do it for Cincinnati.
Yeah, they are the only team. They do have 4 road wins, though. We'll see how big of a deal that is to the committee. Certainly seemed like one last year. All right, Mike, just at 20 minutes, so we're making pretty good time here. I'm going to go to the SEC and a couple of pretty shocking results over the weekend. We're going to go to Kentucky, Auburn first, and then work backwards. The Wildcats are having all their defensive issues all year. They hold Auburn to 59 at the Jungle. Kentucky pulls off this impressive 11-point victory on the road. Is this Do you think this is a sustainable practice for Kentucky, or are they more so of the team that will have to beat you in a shootout?
Yeah, I mean, this Kentucky team is really just all over the road. People can't forget last Saturday they gave up 89 points to Gonzaga. That's not an offensive juggernaut team this year. They got a good midweek win when they beat Ole Miss by 12 on last Tuesday, and then their huge signature win of this year, in my opinion, against Auburn. And that's what's crazy is that Auburn, once again, Sean, they weren't really ever that close in this game. Kentucky had a 10-point lead at halftime, and I think we got to within 8. The Auburn Tigers did at one point in the second half, but I mean, this game got blown wide open later. With about 6-7 minutes to go in this game, Kentucky had upwards of a 16-point lead in this one. So, Auburn they never really had a good opportunity, and this is going to be a major setback for them.
Yeah, this was a game that I kind of want.
Auburn, another team.
Go ahead, Mike.
Auburn, another team that's just been all over the road, though. We talked about they lost to Florida last Saturday, and then on Wednesday they beat South Carolina by 40 points. 40 points. And then they only put up 59 against Kentucky. So you just don't know what to think about this Auburn team either.
Okay, so Mike, I want to go back to Kentucky for a second, and really how they defend is going to be how far they can go. I mean, they can score it with everybody, but they gave up 100 to Tennessee. Tennessee's a really good team, but not a team that will run you up and down the floor. They'll play half court if you want. So I want to watch this game back, see exactly what they did differently. But Onyenso and Thiero defensively are best for Kentucky. They played most of this game. And I think if they can get Trey Mitchell back at the 4, they have at least a chance to guard a little bit. Now, part of being having a good defensive game is, some things have to go your way because after all, good offense beats good defense. But limiting Auburn to just 17 field goals, really good. Kentucky won the battle of the boards. I think that's very important because they love to get their real dangerous out in transition. But I want to watch this back and because I don't really know if this is sustainable for Kentucky or not. But Auburn.
Well, they also only gave up 63 points to Ole Miss earlier last week, against Ole Miss. But the 3 games before then, like you said, Sean, 103 to Tennessee, 77 to Vanderbilt, and 89 to Gonzaga. So who knows?
Yeah, obviously, they can rock with anybody with Dillingham and Shepard, but those two guys are. I think Calipari's doing the best that he can with them. Throw them out there for 4 minutes and pull them out because they are. Shepard's okay, but Dillingham is really bad defensively. He cannot stay in front of many people. But, Mike, we'll go back to that Auburn-South Carolina game because it was a very impressive one. South Carolina rose all the way up to 11th in the country before this one. Now Auburn was still, double-digit favorites in this one. The numbers still haven't quite caught up on the Gamecocks, but 50-28 at halftime, and then they do the same thing again in the second half. I guess you take 1-1 this week from Auburn, but a good opportunity to go 2-1 after looking so good in Game 1.
Yeah, I think Auburn, it's going to be back to the drawing board for them. And who knows, this may have just been a kind of a one-off game, Sean. Neither you nor I saw this one against Kentucky, but they're going to have their work cut out for them coming down the stretch. They're going to have to play Georgia twice. This is a team that's been sneaky. And then their toughest game is going to be at Tennessee next Wednesday. So they get the whole week off to prepare for this Georgia game on the road. So we'll see what happens with the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, Auburn has been very good in bounce-back spots this year.
Yes.
They lost the opening game to Baylor, and then they won a bunch in a row. They lost Appalachian State, then beat Indiana by 28, and then their next loss was a close one. Actually, they lost 2 in a row to Alabama and Mississippi State, but then they did smack Vanderbilt, Ole Miss on the road, and then Alabama again. That Florida loss, like you said, backed it up with a 40-burger on South Carolina. So Auburn will just have to wait and see. The Crimson Tide, though, are in the lead in the SEC. They're in action right now against Florida. We'll check back in with that as it's going on. They are 10-2. Tennessee is 10-3. Auburn and South Carolina are 9-4. Florida and Kentucky are 8-4. And then after that, we have got Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M at 6-6 and 6-7. Those three are on the bubble. And then the 6 teams with numbers next to their name are tournament locks at this point. Florida probably, in the 7-8 seed range, but if they could win tonight, they're looking pretty good. So anything else on the outlook of the SEC?
Yeah, I think it's just been a very interesting. I don't think anybody would have thought Alabama in the middle of December would be leading in the stage in the game, but clearly it's shown that they've played really well, and this is going to be their conference to lose coming down the stretch.
Yeah, the SEC tournament, at least to me, Mike, is looking like one that's going to have to be, must-watch TV, especially in the later rounds, because these teams are.
This is must-see TV,
and
yeah.
Not a lot might be on the line because they're all like top 6 seeds or top 7 seeds, but it's going to be some good basketball games. The top of the top 6 teams, Mike, only one of them has more than 2 losses at home, and that's Kentucky of all people. 2 of those were non-conference losses, so nobody of those teams has more than 2 conference losses at home. Ole Miss still has just the 1 loss at home, and that was to Auburn. So their numbers are not very good, and their non-conference strength of schedule is really poor. But I wouldn't count out any of these 3 other teams on the bubble just yet from knocking off the bigger guys, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see with the SEC. Now, I mentioned that game that was going on right now. Florida is winning by 5 in Tuscaloosa. That would be a humongous win for the Gators, and that would knock the tide even with Tennessee, which Tennessee won that game earlier this year, so Tennessee would be in the lead in the SEC. For seeding, they still do shared titles and stuff like that, but interesting. Keep an eye on that if you're watching with us live. If you're watching later, obviously that game's already over, so we'll see what happens there. Before we go into picks, Mike, we're going to do a little bit of a mid-major watch now. Selection Sunday's less than 4 weeks away. Some of these mid-major tournaments are going to start a week before, and we're going to start with Indiana State, Mike, in the Missouri Valley.
Yeah.
And after getting a number next to their name for the first time since Larry Bird donned the Sycamore jersey, they take 2 losses at the hands of Illinois State and Southern Illinois. Tough couple of days for the Sycamores.
Yeah, and neither of these teams are particularly good either. It's not like they lost to Drake or Bradley or Northern Iowa for that matter. So certainly concerned for the Sycamores. They're going to have a good opportunity to bounce back against Valparaiso tonight, the Fighting Homer Drews. But not really good for them. And they went from a team that was easily into solidly on the bubble, Sean. And my question for you right now, if Drake does take the conference championship or Bradley, does Indiana State have a place in the tournament as an at-large bid?
It is tough to evaluate them because, if you do not win the automatic bid, if you're Indiana State, you have to lose another game in the tournament.
Yeah.
And, if it is to Drake in the championship, well, likely they'll still get in. But if it's any other situation, then, probably not, which, we go back to some of the games in the non-conference. Indiana State, they played Alabama. They lost by 20. They went on the road to Michigan State, competed pretty hard, and they lost. But, just one of those games would have been more than enough to take them into the field because their numbers are pretty fantastic. But I think I would lean towards no at this point, Mike. And Drake did. Yeah. They split with Drake, so that'll be. I really hope they get to meet in the championship game in Arch Madness because that will be a really good one. Round 3 for the tournament. Drake is also a likely candidate for an at-large. They've got some pretty good numbers too. And quick look at their non-conference here. Took a tough loss to Stephen F. Austin. They beat Nevada on a neutral by 19. That's pretty impressive. They did lose on the road at UAB.
That's very impressive.
But other than that, just other conference losses. So now I did mention that earlier. Arch Madness is always the first bid that gets punched. That is the week before. So Missouri Valley in a good position to get some eyes on that tournament with some pretty good teams. Bradley, like you said, and even Northern Iowa, pretty good basketball teams in those 3 and 4 spots. So definitely something to look out for there in the Missouri Valley. The other conference we're going to talk about here, Mike, is one that we've tried to talk about as much as we can because it deserves it. That is the Mountain West. The 6-bid Mountain West is alive. The teams kind of just keep beating each other at home and picking up quad 1 wins because they're all around there. And you've got a Boise State team at 18-8, but they've had a pretty impressive non-conference. Utah State, San Diego State, Nevada, Colorado State, New Mexico, all of those teams looking pretty good. The Aggies from Utah State are leading the conference at 10-4. Boise's at 9-4. The Aztecs of San Diego State at 9-5. Nevada at 8-5. Colorado State at 8-5. And New Mexico at 8-5. So the Mountain West is shaping up much better than any of us could have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. The Mountain West is playing some fantastic basketball. And who would have thought of the 2 teams that are ranked? Neither of them are actually leading the conference. It's Utah State, who's played phenomenally this year in the conference. They just got a huge win on Tuesday against San Diego State, a 5-point win. They're going to have Fresno State, which should be a very winnable game, and then they've got a couple more winnable games against the Chair Force and then San Jose State before they play their last game of the season against New Mexico. So Utah State's kind of in the driver's seat now to win this Mountain West outright. And winning the regular season Mountain West, that's got to give you like a 5 or a 6 seed. I think a 6 seed at worst. When you look at how impressive it is to win this conference this year. Boise State also looks really good right now, as does Nevada, as does Colorado State, as does San Diego State, the defending runner-ups. But very, very talented conference this year, Sean. One of the better ones that we've ever seen come out of the Mountain West.
Yeah, that tournament's going to have to be must-watch TV too. Now, do you happen to know where this tournament is? I think it's at the in Vegas, but it's not really been worthy it's not been worthy of watching before. But quick, it's at the Thomas and Mack Center in Las Vegas. So now I think the WCC tournament is there also at the same time. Now that it's coming back to me, but that'll be a tournament to watch too. 6 really good teams. I think San Diego State is probably in the best position to be the highest seeded team, with Utah State closely behind them, and then Colorado State kind of there. Probably the winner will get the 5, and then the other 2 will get 6 or 7s. Yeah. And then New Mexico is probably a little bit clear of the bubble right now, and then Boise's probably teetering on the first 4 or not. And then I think Nevada's probably one of the last teams in right now. That would be my guess. But looking pretty good. Now, this is a conference that could have a pretty impressive bid stealer here. These UNLV and Wyoming, I mean, I'm not totally ruling out a run to the big dance from those teams, which is going to make the Mountain West Conference Tournament even more important to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens, but this conference can easily get weird, especially with how talented this conference is this year. I mean, it's really impressive to see, and I hope we can continue to see this kind of production from the Mountain West. We've typically seen 1 or 2 teams do pretty well and get into good positions to make a tournament run, but quite nothing like this. A potential 6-bid league. Really impressive.
And, before last year, Mike, obviously San Diego State going to the championship game, but before that year, it was 4 years since the Mountain West won a game in the tournament. So they seem to be taking that momentum from San Diego State last year and bringing it into this one. Colorado State does go to the Pit tonight, 10 o'clock on CBS Sports Network. Really important game here for the Lobos as they want to clear themselves off the bubble a little bit. Colorado State, they're probably okay unless they lose out. They did beat Creighton in the non-con, who, as we've already said, has had a pretty awesome week all around. So, not all the Mountain West teams are on the bubble. Just probably one of them will end up in Dayton for the first four. It's just kind of how it's been over the years. You had, I think Utah State was there last year, Wyoming the year before. So, definitely if all six of these teams get in, one of them is going to have to be there in Dayton. So, Mike, that is all for our mid-major watch. Obviously, we'll try and get to more as mid-majors get more important as their tournaments come around. So we'll wrap up the show with our picks segment as usual. We're going to start in the Pac-12 tomorrow night, Mike. We've got newly ranked Washington State going on the road to face Arizona at 11 Eastern Time on Fox Sports 1. Arizona leading the Pac-12 right now at 11-3. Washington State a half game behind. Any chance Arizona drops this one at home?
Arizona has had some up and down games this year, but their offense has been so explosive of late. Sean, their last three games, 105, 99, and 105 points. And that Utah game was close. Utah's a good team, but Arizona's been on top of their A game lately, and I think they're going to ensure that they get the W here and get a firm grasp on that Pac-12 regular season title.
Yeah, Washington State did win round one, 73-70.
Yeah.
So from their point of view, they're definitely on the right side of the bubble right now. You probably don't need it if you're Washington State, which is a good spot to be in for the Cougars. It's a good spot to be in. I'm going with Arizona, too. I just don't think there's any way that the Wildcats get swept by any team, really, if you give them two chances. So next, Mike, we'll move the calendar to Saturday, starting out noon on CBS. We've got the Houston Cougars going on the road to your Baylor Bears. Now, I'm not going to put you in a position to pick Houston, so I'm going to take them. But really important here for how the rest of the Big 12 shakes out.
Hey, this Baylor team is resilient. They got down again yesterday. They're going to be hosting LJ Cryer as he returns to Waco, and I like the Bears to get the job done, get the upset, get back in contention for the Big 12.
So,
Sick up.
Next slate, 2 o'clock on ESPN. We've got number 8 Duke going on the road to Wake Forest. The Demon Deacons probably on the wrong side of the bubble at this point, but they're undefeated at home this year, Mike. Does that continue, or does Duke get an impressive road win?
Yeah, never say never, especially when you're playing Duke. I think Duke is one of the most overrated top 10 teams that we've seen in a long time. They're playing really well right now. They've got a 15-point lead against Miami. But I'm going to take the upset, and I'm going to have Wake Forest get back in contention for an NCAA tournament bid here on Saturday.
And I'm leaning towards the Deeks, too, Mike. I think that they have been very under the radar. They're kind of a product of a bad ACC all around. They haven't played Duke yet, and they played Carolina once on the road and kind of got smacked. They played a Virginia team on the road and just barely lost. They hung with Duke at Cameron. That game could have gone either way. So I'm going with the Deeks, too. Yeah. I think Wake gets the job done and gets themselves into the tournament, because if they drop this one, Mike, not many other opportunities. You got a Clemson team at home, but that's not going to move the needle as much as this one is. You got a prime opportunity to do it, and I think they'll take it. Next, we've got also on ESPN at 4 o'clock, we've got North Carolina going on the road to Virginia. North Carolina trying to stay on top of the ACC, and we've got Virginia coming off of a humbling by their rivals, Virginia Tech. This is a tough one. Virginia probably right on the bubble, if I had to guess. They might not need it, but it certainly wouldn't hurt. They've got just 4 games left. They also go to Cameron, so you probably need one of them to make sure you're in the field. And I'm gonna go with the Cavaliers bouncing back after that pretty horrendous loss to the Hokies.
Yeah, that's a good pick, Sean. My issue with Virginia is just they're so inconsistent. We finally saw them, it seemed like, turn the corner. They won a bunch of consecutive games, got back in the rankings. They then lost at home by double digits to Pitt, and then got spanked in Blacksburg, 34 points. And you could make the case that maybe they were just overlooking Virginia Tech and preparing for this game against UNC. But this UVA team is just too inconsistent, and I think Baycott's going to dominate down low. I'm going to go with the Heels.
So back over to the SEC, Mike. We've got a pretty loaded slate now that I think about it looking at this. We've got the Crimson Tide of Alabama, who may or may not be in first place in the SEC when this game happens. They're going on the road to Lexington to play Kentucky, 4 o'clock Eastern on CBS. You're first for this one. Who you got here?
Yeah, I think when you're Kentucky or when you're watching Kentucky, you kind of expect the unexpected. And I'm going to go with the unexpected. I'm going to go with Bama to get the win on the road in Lexington.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting game for me. Was the Auburn game a flash in the pan, lucky fluke game? Or are you actually good defensively? You're going to have to be good to slow down Mark Sears in Alabama, and you get your fans back into it. CBS is in the building. I'm going to say that the Wildcats get the job done here. Could go either way, though, and if Kentucky loses, the sky isn't falling, but good opportunity to, they're a 7 seed last week, Mike. They get a big road win, and now if you get another big home win, could be all the way up at a 4 seed. So we're going to go to the Big East, Mike, on Sunday now. Talked about this earlier. Your team of the week, the Creighton Blue Jays, are going to Madison Square Garden to face St. John's, noon Eastern on Sunday on CBS. Ricky P. and the boys desperately need this one. We'll assume that they take care of Georgetown, which they are right now. St. John's has not had a big win in this spot. They've competed very hard, very frequently. I'm going to say St. John's gets the win. Creighton a little bit of a sleepy spot coming off that huge win against UConn. What do you think about this one?
Good pick, Sean. I'm going to go with the Johnnies as well. I think Pitino's going to get his signature win. Things aren't looking great, but they're looking good enough right now at halftime against Georgetown. But Creighton's going to be coming off of a pretty big high in this game. They got to be careful not to have that hangover hit them Sunday at the Garden.
Last game, Mike, we have a game that is not featuring a top 25 team. It looked like it would be just a couple weeks ago. Two teams that are probably not having as good of seasons as they hoped in the American Conference. That's Florida Atlantic. They're going to go on the road to play Memphis. FAU, still safe tournament-wise, probably a 7 or 8 seed at this point. And Memphis has completely fallen off the face of the earth here. A bunch of losses in a row. Penny Hardaway, who was the coach of the year at one point, now might be worrying for his job come the end of the year. Given Memphis any chance here, or are the Owls going to go on the road and get the W?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Sean, I do want to give credit to South Florida and how impressive they've been this year. They've knocked off both Florida Atlantic and Memphis on the road, so they've been a really good team. I'm going to go with the Owls to get a rebound win. It seems like Florida Atlantic's season's really been up and down, Sean. They've had some really, really impressive victories, but they've really fallen flat on their face in the American Conference play. They're probably not even going to get a regular season championship despite their early wins against Butler, A&M, Virginia Tech, and then a few other good ones like Arizona being their signature win of the year. So they've been a little all over the place, but I think they're going to get the job done against a Memphis team that is really struggling right now.
Yeah, FAU.
Memphis team,
Go ahead.
Keep in mind, this Memphis team is 4-0 against top 25 teams this year. 4-0. But they have struggled so much in the American Conference play, they may have played themselves out of a chance for the big dance.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Owls, too. I think, they, barring a total collapse, they're going to make the tournament. And maybe you just need games to matter a little bit more to get the best out of your team. They've had a couple close calls against teams that they really should be beating by a lot. But this is the time of the year where they are going to start. I'm still going to give them any chance against pretty much anyone in the country come tournament time, but it's almost like it needs to get to there for them just because they made the Final Four last year and everybody's back pretty much. But American Conference tournament might not be as interesting as it once thought, unless you're a fan of a bubble team, because you'll be rooting for FAU pretty hard in that, because if anyone else wins, that's going to be a bid steal. You've got South Florida, who is probably my pick to win the conference tournament at this point. You got a Charlotte team up there, an SMU team, and then Memphis, all of a sudden is 7-6 and 7-7 if the game goes as we predicted, Mike. So that's it for picks today. and just under 45 minutes, so pretty good timing. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. Be sure to check out the Instagram and like and subscribe if you haven't